here's a point I want to make to young guys listening. If you're single and you're wondering like, how do I get girls? How do I get good at this? I'd say the number one thing is internalize the fact that you're trying to vet them as much as they're trying to vet you.
Sam Sulek, Sam Sulek in particular, the experts are in some way distracting him from what he needs to do because he is the science.
But that's exactly the point. Like, you're supposed to be locked into this system of control. You're supposed to accept every little thing that they tell you so that you're a good and obedient bug man contributing to the hive, right?
And I'm going to go contrary to you guys. It's like those people that are still, it's the year 2026 right now, right? 2028, whatever. It's like the people that are still talking about building 7, etc. And I'm not going to go too far with that, but you know those words and you can probably intuit what I'm saying. You're the most conformist person I've ever seen. You have a tattoo of a word that you don't even know what it looks like. And then he points over to Dr. Wilson. He says, he's the real nonconformist. He's got a pocket protector. All right, guys, thanks so much for checking out the video here today. And we have a pretty good discussion on, a couple different topics that are related to last week's, discussion about the red pill and the dating dynamics, but more so in a broader sense of double clicking on overoptimization. And so, yeah, I think today we're going to go through some issues here that we think are still unanswered. So I don't know, asking Dean here, kind of broad overview of what we're talking about today, kicking it over to Dean for the overview. What are you thinking?
Yeah, so the topic that was on my mind is this thing we're calling overoptimization. So we had a clip on the channel this week, and we sort of touched on it last week, but I think it's worth diving into even further. So basically what we mean by overoptimization is this phenomenon that's happening in the world where everything we do is becoming more and more perfected and more precise, and it's stripping away the humanity out of certain things. So what we talked about last week is dating, and I think we're going to double click on that today as well. But this applies to everything. So, work, your career, your fitness, even down to the things that we're consuming, and the products that we use and the things that are sold to us. And I think it's a major issue because it's when you over-optimize something and you strip the humanity, you take us further away from that which is ultimately the most meaningful, right? Which is our human relationships. Right. And what we get out of things on a spiritual and a personal level. It's not all about just getting things done quickly or making a dollar. There's things that.
No, and I know what you're thinking. I know you're sitting there thinking, hey, I want to go in and make something better. What's wrong with that, right? Mm-hmm. So we are going to tackle the pros and cons of doing this process, and we are going to tackle kind of when it's appropriate in our minds to go ahead and jump into something and optimize it. But there is a point where that becomes too much, right? That's why we call it over-optimization. So I think just with that said, we do want to just jump right into the over-optimization situation. So can you give me an example of something that's not in the dating world and not in the kind of World of Warcraft world that we discussed that's over-optimizing that you could think of in your recent life, or maybe somebody you've observed?
Yes, absolutely. So, you and I have been making these YouTube videos, obviously, and one of the first things we came across is like, how are we going to edit the videos, right? We obviously knew we didn't want to pay, however many hundreds of dollars for like an Adobe subscription or for DaVinci. I don't even know what the proprietary softwares are today, but we immediately were looking for like a free solution. And there are free solutions, but even those are over optimized. An example would be like CapCut, right? So CapCut is a free program. You just go on, download it, comes with a bunch of free plugins. But here's the issue with it. It's over optimized for the lowest level consumer, right? And there's probably value to that if you're just making something very simple, if you're just like editing a family video or something and you don't need anything spectacular. That's what it's for. But I think that the temptation, even for some people like us who are specifically trying to make like videos and publish them and get them out and like get high quality, the temptation is to stick with that, and then maybe even like, when we get more advanced, just like pay for the advanced features.
Right, and that's really their subscription model, right? Yeah. Is they offer you a little bit of something that's convenience to cut the convenience off, and then just enough, right? Just enough until it's not sufficient enough, not optimized enough, right? And then, but you've already been using it so much, so you're almost locked into their ecosystem.
Yep.
And then they'll say, hey, now that we have you hook, line, and sinker, here's some more features. Just pay $8 a month, and you'll have it for the rest of your life.
Yep.
But it's something like that where that actually has become too over optimized, where you're thinking, hang on, all I need is X, Y, and Z trades. I don't need to go over the top with it. But back to what you said, that's perfect for shipping fast. So to kind of foreshadow a little bit of this topic, it's actually good to over optimize in the beginning because you're 0% optimized. So it's okay to just jam as much optimization as you can in the beginning because you're trying to overload yourself with information. And a lot of people say, oh, information overload's a bad thing. I actually think it's a good thing in the beginning, right? Because you want to absorb as much as you can as early as possible.
Yeah.
But once you get past a certain point of diminishing returns, you don't want to be thinking about, hey, should I use this software, this, and that, and the other? You should really be focusing on like the original source of the situation is, should I make my message better, right? And that's kind of what we think is how much time should be spent on thinking about the software we're using versus thinking about the message we're trying to deliver. So it's like you start over optimizing the software thing, and you get out of scope for what you originally set out to do, right? So
it's
kicking
optimized,
it back over to you.
It's optimized from like here's another major issue with the over optimization. It's not optimized for you, right? It's optimized for the people who are selling you the product. Like they've created something that they're able to market and sell and sustain a profit on each consumer paying $8 a month, right? Which is not a lot of money. I mean, and if you're doing, if you're making videos like us or any kind of other video and or content, and you're trying to push it out on a regular basis, you may think to yourself $8 a month is nothing, right? And it's not a big deal. But all of those little things add up. So you got your CapCut, you got your image editing software for your thumbnails, whatever. I don't know. I can't think of other examples for this thing in particular. But, the point is...
your internet subscription. You got a lot of things that go into it, right?
Yeah.
Your air conditioning bills.
So, and actually, I wanted to ask you, because you have even like another channel where you do stuff like this with like Linux and installing those things. So, I mean, you're that Windows or even like Mac OS could be another example of something that's over optimized for the capitalist and not necessarily for the consumer, right?
Right, and that's a perfect example because I like to think of Mac as the evil of genius, and I don't know if that's that we can probably tinker with that verbiage because it's got something to it.
I like it.
Yeah, because they what they like to do is they create in a genius way. Because this is the problem, right? I can see their strategy and I respect it, but I disagree with it, right, morally. So, but their strategy is to put you in a sort of an ecosystem lock-in, right? And so you buy one of their products and you have to use everything else that they have, right? And you start to realize, well, actually, it's a lot more convenient if I have an iPad. I can use an iPad with an iPhone, right? It's all because they work together,
right?
Or what have you. Or maybe I need the AirPods, or like I need everything that they have, right? To a point where you pull up an iPhone these days and there's not even a 3.5 millimeter audio jack.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody that I know growing up, every single phone they had supported the same, earphone ecosystem, quote unquote. I can't believe we're calling it headphones an ecosystem, but you see where I'm going with this.
Yep.
Is that they've sort of done that with their firmware and their operating system and everything. So you have a point where you even get excluded socially if you send if you're in a group chat with a green chat message, right?
You get roasted.
So they've designed and crafted a great, perfect. It's from a game theory perspective, it's genius, and there's even more I could say about it as far as how hard it is to repair some of this stuff. Like you have to get a special screwdriver to even open any of their products.
Yep.
Whereas, I don't know if you had this growing up, like every laptop that I had that wasn't a MacBook, I could just take a Phillips screwdriver, pop open the battery and replace the battery for like $100 or maybe less, pop open the hard drive, get a new hard drive, get a new solid state, whatever, put that in. So I had laptops lasting me 4, 5, 6 years. And nowadays people are telling me, hey, I've had my MacBook for 2 years and it's starting to slow down. What should I do? And I think of that since I can see the whole situation, I'm like, that's genius from them, but evil. Yep. It's like the evil of genius situation. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. And I think minimal is better in some cases and focus on what you're actually doing. It's kind of the Unix philosophy. Just do one thing and do it good, right? For every program you're using. So I don't know. It's kind of a big monolith of stuff going on with the MacBook. But
I think the way I see it is like training wheels. These are training wheels that they've put on, and it does make the product very easy to use. And for the average, just kind of regular bugman kind of guy, right? There's no issue with that. It's good for them even because they're not doing anything fancy, or they're not trying to use this technology to like improve their own lives or get after anything. They're just a consumer, right? And that's who it's optimized for. It's optimized for the capitalist and for the lowest common denominator, just the regular consumer. But if you're trying to escape that, if you're trying to build something, if you're trying to get after it in some certain way, you have to understand these products are not made for you, and you're going to come across that very easily. I mean, you mentioned like just all the software stuff, but it even comes down to the hardware, like the 3.5 millimeter jack, and even like the charging cables. Like, why don't we have standardized charging cables? Like, that doesn't.
Right.
Why does that
We
need
used
to
to.
be like? Why do we need this specific kind of thing just for the iPhone? We
Right.
don't. We don't need it. It's simply because they want to keep you locked into their ecosystem. And again, there's strong reasons why you should try to be escaping this. So that's kind of the whole purpose of this conversation, is to dig into where does the problem lie, and then we'll talk more about solutions. But to
Right.
circle it back just for a sec, so I was saying, like, I see them as training wheels. Okay,
Right.
a perfect example of that is CapCut. CapCut is editing with training wheels. Like, there's not much there's not much freedom, there's not much control that you have compared to something like what we're using now, which we're both really big fans of, is Kdenlive, right? Which is a free open source software, completely free and fully featured.
Right. And
Right.
I think the fact that it's free as in freedom. So CapCut's free, right? You can start off with it's free as in free beer, right? It's free $0
Yeah.
at the beginning. But even if Kdenlive was like $10 or something, or $20, whatever, if it was some dollar amount, I would pay for it because of the fact that I know now how it all works.
Yeah.
And I think the way it's kind of designed is you can see all the source code. If there's ever an issue, the community will put in a patch and fix an issue for it. It's pretty much got the minimal stuff you need, and then a bunch of other extra stuff. In my mind, I don't think you need anything else, but
Yeah.
we're not doing complicated stuff like drone footage or stuff like that. So I see merit to this other, proprietary stuff. But I think for most people, people don't understand that you just need the basic stuff. And again, to go back with you and on the Kdenlive thing, you were mentioning it's about training wheels. It's a good piece of software that, in my mind, is the basics and does one thing, does it well, but it's also teachable to somebody very fast, right? So talk to me about your first experience using it and tell me how the training wheels metaphor, right? Like, you took them off, but how does it feel?
It's like, it's overwhelming, really. You jump into that software for the first time, and there's just so many little buttons and options, and the interface looks strange, and it looks similar to CapCut, and it's a video editing software, so they all kind of have that same kind of template. But you can just tell that there's more options and more freedom, and that's the key with the training wheels analogy here. Is like, when you've learned how to ride a bike and you first take off the training wheels, it's very overwhelming, it's very scary, but you quickly learn as soon as you get comfortable with it, which does not take very long. You just have to be brave a little bit and kind of push through that initial fear. You find out how much more free and how much more mobile and how much more fast you can go on the bike. You gain so much control because you lose the training wheels. And that's exactly what we're doing with Kdenlive. We're taking out the training wheels, but that gives us, it like launches us to go much higher because we have, it's more in our hands, right?
And I want to make this kind of analogy here, and tell me what you think about this. There's two sides of the coin here. There are two sides of the candle, I guess. There's the CapCuts of the world, where they're, in my mind, like you said, optimized for the company, not the consumer, which means, in my mind, they're so easy for you to use that it's almost too easy initially, to a point where it makes you almost worse at editing software or editing videos, because you're relying on this software to make it almost in a Bugman format, just quick little, patch it together. And then the other side of the spectrum is maybe, and I haven't used these softwares, but maybe the Adobe Premieres and stuff of the world, where they have maybe way too many features, etc., but they're an all-encompassing suite. So you could probably take one of those and like figure out exactly how to use it to its full extent, but it's almost over-designed in a way, because it is one of those companies where people are on staff and they feel like they literally have to add value to their job, like make their job has security exist, so they add features to the software that nobody asked for.
The company itself has to do that, right? Not even just the people, but the company itself has to do that. They have to justify the subscription that you're paying, which means they're going to have to push out updates, whether they're really needed or not, or whether they're really adding anything or not, right?
Do you think there's some level of over-optimization, like you pointed out, for the consumer versus for the employer? Do you think that there's a little middle ground that we've kind of found with the Kdenlive, maybe example, and in other aspects of life, there's probably that middle ground people can look for?
Yeah. So, and I was just thinking as you were talking, I was like, it's perfectly possible in my view that if we were doing like professional level, like we were making movies or something really high level professional stuff, then you may need to upgrade. Perhaps, I don't know, because I'm just scratching the surface of Kdenlive, right? So I really don't know what's possible. But I do think,
But you
I'm
feel
gonna
like you have
say,
more freedom though.
oh yeah, way more freedom. And I'm going to say, just without knowing enough about it and willing to be wrong about this, I'm willing to say that I think it's fully possible that you could use Caden Live like on a professional level. You know what I mean? Like the
Oh, people
features are
do.
there.
People definitely do.
Yeah, exactly. Like the features are there. You could push this software to the limit and probably achieve a professional level result. But again, I don't know, and I'm sure I know. Actually, I hope that there are like professional video editors in the comments who want to talk to me about that, because
There,
I would like to. I would
there
love to
are.
know. But it's that's just my sense of it. Is Caden Live has the freedom, and that's the whole point of this conversation is escaping the Bugman atmosphere and finding the freedom. So actually,
Right.
and you have anything more you want to say about this? Because there's a question I want to ask you before we
Let me let you cook on that for a second, because I do want to say one more thing. Basically on what you said is are there professionals that are using the software? I definitely think there are, because I've seen a lot of big channels that use it. With the 1 million or more subscriber level people, and that's YouTube, right? But it's exactly like you said. You fit your use case, right? And we're not saying don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that. We're saying figure out what you need for your life and identify what is actually slowing you down with the paradox of choice, and what is actually something that can enable you to focus on the raw materials of what you were getting into. So that's all I wanted to add to what you said. But yeah, kick it over to you for that question, and I'm excited to jump into the next topic.
So the question I had for you, we're going to start using this term a lot. I can already tell, and even throughout this conversation, we've already used it a few times. What is a bugman? What do we mean by that?
Right, and I've got two answers. I've got sort of the TikTok answer, meaning I'll give it to you in 10 seconds or less, and then I'll give you more of a longer form. The 10 seconds or less answer is somebody who is waiting to buy the newest iPhone. So that doesn't mean that everybody that's waiting to buy the new iPhone is a bugman, but that means that almost every bugman is waiting to buy the new iPhone. And so basically, somebody who is dialed in, or plugged in rather, not dialed, plugged into the system, and basically experiencing reality in the same lens that the hypermajority of the populace is experiencing it, and somebody who doesn't really think for themselves, but they want to be given thoughts. So this is your average, CNN 24-hour listener, your average Fox News 24-hour listener. This is your average, hey, I have the newest iPhone because I had to get it, right? I'm just going to throw in my iPhone 15, and then they're going to send me an iPhone 16 if I pay them $1,000 a year or whatever, right? And this is something where you think, you and me would think like, hey, what's going on with that? Why would you upgrade your phone? It's brand new. Like, you just bought it like a year ago. But as we talked about earlier, these things are meant to be upgraded because of how people have been conditioned to say, hey, I need a new phone every year. So that's how their business model works. But kicking it over to you with the Bugman question, I think that I didn't do a full justice of a definition, but I gave an example of it. What would you do? What would your example be if you had to give an example?
So I'm going to go top down with it. So I'm going to weave a little bit, but I'll bring it back to give you a more concise definition. So the way I see it is this, right? And I'm going to relate it to my personal life. So growing up, I always felt a little bit alienated from the people around me, right?
Right.
Because they would do those kinds of things that you just said. They would be excited about the new iPhone release. They'd be excited about whatever popular artist was releasing an album on that particular day. They would follow celebrity news. They would consume sports, and like that would be their main hobby. And I was like, I enjoyed these things. I want to partake in, just to be social. I'm an extroverted person, so I like to be social. So I would partake in them too. But for me, it was always like, I have this one thing that I enjoy and it's awesome. I'm just going to kind of keep doing that, and like another example is like video games. Back when I used to play a lot of video games, there's people who are constantly playing the latest game, whatever it is. I don't know. Like you see them on Steam. They're always 10 people all playing the same game, and that game just came out like that day, right? And they're just kind of going from one node to the next. Things get released, and they get excited about it, and they spend the next month doing that, and then they drop it for the next thing. And this is what a bugman does. He just sort of consumes blindly because he something in his wiring or in his conditioning has prevented him from becoming really, really interested in just one thing, maybe just two or three things, which is really what you need to do in this world. I mean, this world is too big and too complex for you to be a master of all things. The reason, people say this, that the Renaissance man is dead, right? There's no more people who just, like Leonardo da Vinci, was an expert in like 20 different things. Okay, well, becoming an expert in Leonardo da Vinci's time is a lot different than becoming an expert today in any particular field. because we simply have more knowledge and more resources, and there's more time that has passed and more people have put their energy into it. So the threshold for expertise has been pushed higher and higher. And what that means is that you can spend your entire life on, if you want to spend your entire life on 10 different things, you're only ever going to become mediocre at it. Whereas if you focus hard on one or two things, that's where you're really going to see results and push yourself higher. So the Bugman, I don't think he's thinking on this level of I want to become an expert and become a Renaissance man. They're not really thinking that. But that just sort of illustrates what I'm saying, which is that the Bugman is stuck in this constant circling, of just whatever the newest thing is, and they never really break out of it because they're not incentivized to. They're stuck in this hyper-optimized capitalist system, which is keeping them compliant and happy and fat and lazy and all this other stuff, right?
Right, and the Bugman aspect of it that I view, kind of what you said, that layers back to what we were talking about earlier, is Leonardo da Vinci was able to become an expert of many and a jack of many, if you will, because his world was not over-optimized. There was low-hanging fruit for him to kind of pick and say, hey, this is easy, this is that, and this is the other thing. I'm not taking away from his genius, but I'm saying it's a lot harder to maneuver that landscape in today's world because things have already been over-optimized. So the Bugman maybe feels like there's a little devoid in his heart saying, hey, I can't do anything perfect, so let me just do everything like everybody else. And kind of what you were thinking when you were mentioning all those things about how they're just doing the next thing, immediate things I started thinking of were these following things that are things that are basically, you can tell they're Bugmanized, if you will, because you hear about them for a little bit and then you never hear about them ever again, right? Everyone always says this is going to be the next big thing, and then 6 months later, what is that, right? I'm gonna give you a list of those things just off the top of my head. Squid Games, Marvel, Pal World.
Oh,
that's a big one. Pal World just top of the Steam charts
Pal
for one
World,
day, and then it's like, oh, it's the next wave, right? And then things that are
Marvel
not like
Rivals.
that, where they were the wave. Yeah, Marvel Rivals, exactly. And then there's like definitely other stuff too. Black Friday as a concept, right? Like that's another chapter, and we'll get into it. But there are things that are contrapositive to that, where in my mind they are the wave, but they still endure. So they like actually kind of the Bugmen, they fall out of it because they don't have the attention span to like get into something long term. So they pretend to kind of ride the wave of something that's in my mind a fake Bugman product, which is genius. And I'm going to give you examples of that, and maybe you'll resonate, and maybe kick it back over to you and see what your thoughts are. But Breaking Bad, okay? I hate to say it, but Game of Thrones. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
As somebody that doesn't like that show, but you can argue about the ending. But the first 6 seasons was Bugmanized, but it has the longevity, right? MP3 players at the time, right? Everyone had one, and et cetera, but then people started tinkering with them, and it became its own thing. And a lot of things are like that in my mind. They're the wave, et cetera, right? But then they become something that's still, because the product is actually good over time, people start to figure out, hey, what can I do with this actually? Like the non-Bugmen, and I have this vitriolic reaction to something when the Pal Worlds of the world, right? I can't partake in that stuff because I have some personality flaw that doesn't allow me to say, hey, everyone else is doing this thing, so let me do it, which holds me back in some cases. But I do get the jump on things a little bit later to the party, and I see when people kind of leave the hype away, and I can see, let's optimize some of this, because already all of the over-optimization, quote unquote, has already been started by the Bugmen, and they start to leave because their attention span is so low. So I can jump in and say, hey, let me figure out a little bit more about this, right? So back over to you. What is some example of something that's a Bugman style thing that trended but then fell off in your mind, like the things I listed, Squid Games, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, any modern TV show, all of the Marvel movies, every single one of them, any Marvel product whatsoever, the latest iPhone, cryptocurrency, right? These are all things that that people. I mean, here's the thing: I'm not bashing crypto. I mean, get rich if you want, if that's how you're going to do it. Cool, but it's just another fad. Like, it's just another way to invest. This like people get excited about, and then they'll find something else.
Right.
I
ChatGPT,
want to connect
arguably.
this to. I want to go even higher, right, in my top-down view, because I have a really good thought I want to get out. So, in the Christian world, you see this this yearning for the more traditional forms of worship. So, I'm not Catholic, but I can tell you from my experience and my research in the Catholic faith, there's two ways to do Mass. Okay, and Mass is the most important ritual in the Catholic faith. It's what they do every Sunday. There is what's called the Novus Ordo, which sometime in the middle of the 20th century, the Pope basically said that in order to attract new people to the faith, we need to make it more accessible. And so what he essentially did is he removed all the Latin. So Catholic Mass used to be done purely in Latin, okay? Which is obviously, I mean, if you're an English speaker, you go to a Latin Mass, you're going to be freaking lost. You're not really going to know what's going on. So the Pope said, hey, let's go ahead and make sure that Mass is being done in the vulgar language, which means in the language of wherever the church is at that particular time. So it's more accessible.
Right.
Okay, but then there were also other changes that were made to make it less traditional. So a lot of the specific steps of the ritual were sort of like, hey, we'll leave this up to the priest in any particular parish to sort of do what they think is best. So we're going to eliminate some of these more traditional styles in order to try to attract new people because we feel the church needs to grow. So understandable impulse, right? I get the impulse completely. But what they've done is they've stripped the tradition, and this gets to what we're saying, because when the bugman, as we're conceptualizing him, is going from one thing to the next to the next. He never stays on anything long enough to really understand it. And when you don't spend long enough on one thing to understand it, you never really understand yourself. Okay, and so when you strip away the traditionalism from the Catholic Mass, you're erasing, whether you like it or not, you're erasing thousands of years of history and tradition that people no longer have access to. And that's the key thing here, is that all of this consumerism, bugman type mentality is stripping away something deeper. There's something that we have as a foundation of a society, or that we used to have, which kept us tethered to the past, and it helped us understand the steps that we had to take to get where we are today and have an appreciation for that. Nowadays, people who think about the past think of people who live in the past as being like dumb, idiot savages, right? Which is so stupid, because they built the world that you and I live in. They came up with the traditions. They figured out these problems before we ever were alive. And so we have to look at them with respect. We have to understand why they had their traditions, why they had their practices, and try to either, maybe we modify them for whatever time we're living in here and there, but we have to understand why they were there and keep them moving forward. So this is the key issue, in my view, of what is the problem with all this? Why is this even an issue? Because it's stripping away that fundamental part of us.
No, and I think what you were getting at a little bit in that is, and I agree with what you said, and I think it's pretty important to kind of digest that. So I think the main thing that I picked up from that, though, and that I forgot to say, and I think I'm glad you said it, is that stripping traditionalism out of life in any aspect of the world is actually the higher level of what a bugman is. So when you asked me earlier at the top of the episode, what is a bugman? Yeah, I gave you the quick answer because it's something that's like more of like, what are the symptoms of a bugman? Like, what are you going to see, right? Like, it's a diagnosis. How do you diagnose what a bugman is?
Right.
But in spirit, a bugman is really somebody who doesn't believe in traditions. That's a kind of a weird little take, but it's kind of related to what you said. It's exactly related to what you said. So it's somebody who doesn't believe like anything that their parents gave them are good, or anything that the society that they were born into is good. So they're going to create their own morality system. They're going to create their own ethics. They're going to create their own path to a good life. And this opens up the door to dangerous rationalizations for what I would consider to be not optimal behavior, and what you would consider to be not morally good behavior, right? So both of us would actually agree with that. And a lot of this is coming into the bugman will say, hey, I actually figured out my own way to maneuver my own morality, so now I'm going to allow myself to insert thing here, right? I'm not going to say it because I'm going to let you guys imagine what they're thinking. And then they've kind of come up with their own worldview on saying, because traditionalism is bad, like you said, because in 1300 BC, like those people didn't know what I know about science, or what have you, science, for those of you who don't get the reference. Right. I know that I've seen a bunch of studies that say that it's actually offensive to use this, that, and the other language. So therefore, I'm more intellectually awake than this 1300 BC guy. But the 1300 BC guy could build a house by himself, literally like in 2-3 weeks. He could build a farm. He could build wheels and stuff. He can do whatever he wants. He's already getting after it, and he doesn't have to deal with this bugman style, because back then bugmen were not. I don't think bugmen were as common back then. But anyway, back to kind of what I was trying to get into interweave with what you said is the bugman really doesn't have any, almost doesn't have agency. When you see a bugman, you'll see one because they're almost dialed into whatever they're looking at, whatever digital reality that they're seeing. They're almost following the herd in a sense that if you take the herd away, it's kind of interesting. I would like to see what would have happened to them, because to me, whenever I see a bugman in real life, they're locked into their phone or locked into whatever system they're dealing with. I'm curious, like, how do they function in their house, like at their house, like when they're home alone, if they ever are?
Yeah, probably not. And if they're alone, they're scrolling TikTok or they're on Netflix, like you said. And I think you made an important point. Like the Bugman, if you disconnect him from that, he'd flounder. He wouldn't know what to do because there's nothing to him, right? He's been disconnected. Right. From that part of himself, and this is all by design. Like you don't really want people who are going to ask questions about the latest update. Like if Apple or I don't know, some company pushes some update and they're going to charge you for the update to the product. What you don't want is people who are going to look at the update notes and be like, what are you asking me to pay for here? Like, what is even here? You're just updating the UI a little bit. You're fixing some bugs that I've never noticed. Like, why am I going to pay you money to do this, right? It's just an example. You don't want people like that. You want bugs.
Yeah.
You want bugs who are going to be like, yes, perfect. Thanks for this latest update. Here's $20 and go on their merry way, right? That's who the society is designed for. That's why you don't want to be a bug man. It's not a good place to be. You've been disconnected from the more fundamental truths, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to give you those truths to help you escape.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it does feel easy to kind of bugmanize your life a little bit, where you say, hey, I don't want to think about this. Let me offset the cost of thinking about this to somebody else and kind of take whatever they say and do it. And that feels good. Honestly, I've done it before. It feels easy to kind of just, hey, I'm gonna put the mask on because that's what I'm being told to do. I'm gonna do what I'm told to do. I'm gonna DoorDash because it's it's what I'm told to do. I'm gonna deliver my groceries to myself while I'm playing the newest Marvel game, through the Whole Foods app or whatever. And that's some kind of lifestyle bloat that is definitely affecting the laptop class of pretty much 90% of them are bugmen, right? Because they're all, just look at their laptops. What kind of laptops are they using? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But it's like these people are. I want to be able to help these folks because I never was a full bugman, but I almost immediately had this instinct, and I know a lot of people out there who can relate to this instinct to kind of go away from what people are doing, because I'm instantly questioning, is that thing even worth doing? And this was even at a young age, like I want to say at 12 or even maybe 11 years old, I was immediately like contrarian, if you want to call it that, but not to a point where doing it to just be contrarian, right? Not the veganism of the world, and nothing wrong with, I'm not even going to say nothing wrong with veganism, but just not to be contrarian just to be contrarian, right? There's completely different things. And I think it's, again, a personality flaw on some level, but I think it's done more good than harm for me personally. So I'm going to ask you this: what is the earliest memory that you have of you rejecting consent from this kind of bugman system?
So I mean, probably goes back to like middle school, high school. So back in our day, right, a million years ago, the thing to be in like middle school was like the emo kid, or like the or like there was other cliques obviously, but I think to this. Unrelated, but I feel like those kinds of things are sort of gone now. I don't really know the kids have those types of cliques as much as they used to, but I'm sure they still exist. But back in our day, that was like you chose a side, right? There was teams. Like you go to school and you're a member of some team. You're either a nerd, you're a jock, you're an emo kid, and then that's your group. There's very little overlap between those teams, right? And I remember like the group of people that I was friends with became like emo kids, right? And the middle, here's the thing, in like elementary school, everybody's the same. There's no real cliques. But by the time you get to middle school, high school, that's when people start to try to forge an identity of their own, and they fit into these. And I remember like seeing all my friends like start to dress in black, and then they would wear these silly studded belts. And nowadays, that's like a feminine style, which it's always been a feminine style. But back then, like I recognized that as a feminine style. I was like, why would you look like a girl? Like, why are you doing that? Like, why are you dyeing your hair stupid colors? Why are you wearing it over your face like that? That's what the girls are doing. Like, why are you doing that? Like, this is not masculine, right? And I didn't know how to articulate this, but I was just put off by it. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I'm not just going to fit into this fad because, I don't know, you want to attract girls and stuff, right? And as you keep saying, like, it's a personality flaw, and it was like I probably would have been happier if I just went along with it, right? Because that's what everybody was doing. I would have been more accepted. I would have been happier at the time, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I was like, this is dumb. I'm just gonna do what I want to do. And then
I'm gonna interrupt you here for a second and say I keep saying personality flaw because I'm trying to be a little bit pseudo humble, right? But I don't actually view it as a personality flaw because it's how I met you, right? It's how I met some other people in this world. And I'm going to go ahead and say I think it might be a hot take, but I think most people are not actually bugmen. Okay, and what I mean by that is it takes one or two people to kind of get into the social contagion to start doing something, and then the rest of the people just start saying, "Hey, is that what I'm supposed to do?" And I start thinking, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Am I supposed to do that? And back to what you said about when you were a kid, you had this instinct to say, "Hey, that's feminine. I'm not going to do that," right? Can you imagine what it would be like if you vocalized that today? Like, what would you? Who would tell you to be okay with your inner thoughts
Oh yeah.
today
Yeah.
if you said
Yeah.
that?
And it's good that we're talking about like teenagers, right? Because I think to an extent it's fine for a teenager to be a bug man, right? I mean, they don't know enough about the world. They're still figuring stuff out. And what you're supposed to do is grow out of that. You're supposed to go through the fad enjoyer stage when you're a kid, and then by the time you're a man, you escape that and you understand, oh, I'm not going to just go through every trend. Like well, at a certain point it becomes overwhelming to do that. I mean, it's like there's just too many things going on. I'm just going to stick with what I like. And then you become boring, right? And that's just kind of one of the things you got to understand is like when you become like an older person, like you and I, middle-aged men in our 30s, right? Like we don't care
Boomers.
about
We're
being
boomers in the
cool.
woods.
Yeah, it's like being cool is like not in our.
Right.
I
It
don't
just
care
comes
about
naturally.
that. Like I'm just yeah, exactly. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Like that's what being cool really is like you just kind of are yourself, and you know a lot about the things you're interested in, and you're capable of relating that to other people in an interesting way. That's going to make them interested in it, right? You don't have to
Right.
signal stuff. Here's a good example, by the way. You don't need to go out and get a bunch of tattoos and dye your hair dumb in order to seem like outwardly edgy and cool, right? You can just be edgy and cool, right? Like the like the views the views that you and I have are like actually like on the edge, right? Like we're gonna ruffle feathers, right? That we don't care. It's not that that's why we're doing it, but it's just a fact. It's like we actually have edgy views.
No, it's just
You see people with like tattoos and makeup and all this crap. Like I guarantee you, they just agree with the Reddit consensus on every little thing.
exactly. You can almost download their entire viewpoint in a zip file, plug it into your a model, and say, "Hey, I know what he believes about this, that, or the other." And I have a perfect kind of analogy from House MD. You know that show with Hugh Laurie.
Yeah.
So that
I know that one,
show
yeah.
House MD. There's an episode where there's a kind of a character that comes into the play and he says, I'm a nonconformist. I like a nonconformity. And he has like a Chinese tattoo. He has like a symbol, it's like a Chinese character tattoo on his neck or something, or a hand or whatever. And then House is like, "You're the most conformist person I've ever seen. You have a tattoo of a word that you don't even know what it looks like." And then he points over to Dr. Wilson. He says, "He's the real nonconformist. He's got a pocket protector." So it's just like you said. It's leaning into things that you don't care if people say that's not cool. But you're just like, I don't care because it's functional and I don't really appeal to a cool, right? And again, it's tough as a kid, but because you were trying to fit in and everything, and I get that. But when you're an adult, you're not a kid anymore, and I think people forget to grow out of the bugman phase. But even you and me, for example, like we're people that were individuals that didn't get susceptible to that bugman style even as kids. So I think there's something to that. It might be some type of gene or some type of, I don't know. There's something there because it's just the thought of doing something that everyone was doing. The whole FOMO thing. I don't ever get FOMO because in my mind I almost get GOMO. Glad I'm missing out. It's like kind of a weird,
right. Yeah. Please
a weird way to
miss me
say
on
it.
that. And in a month when you're over it, you're gonna look dumb,
Right.
and I'm gonna still be doing the same exact thing, right? So I want to expand a little bit on this too. Is like, so I've made the point already. I think that this is dangerous because it's the bugman identity strips you from more fundamental truths, more fundamental traditions, and things that keep you grounded, right? That these are all very necessary for your foundation as a human being and as a man. And we've talked a little bit about like big lies versus little lies. So the bugman identity enables you to accept lies that escalate, right? You start with a small lie, which is, I need the latest iPhone. Very small lie, not a big deal. I need to play the new Marvel game. Not a big deal. It's a small lie, but it leads to bigger things, which is, okay, I need the latest iPhone, and that means that I need to love this iPhone, and I need to love, like, for example, the diversity, equity, and inclusion that went into building this iPhone, because that's what Apple taught me about, right? So that's a little bit bigger lie. And then what goes beyond that? Okay, now according to this diversity, equity, and inclusion, a man can turn into a woman. Okay, so I just need to accept
Right.
that too, right? Oh, and then this man needs to be allowed into my wife's bathroom at the same time. Oh, so it's just another lie. I just need to accept that, right? That it just keeps
Yeah.
going up and up, and these lies get worse and worse. What do you have to say? I want to hear what you have to say about that.
No, and I love the
subject.
way you're going with this from the ground. You're attempting to do bottom up, which I like. It's actually interesting
Yeah,
because I'm viewing
yeah,
it from
I did my
I,
best.
I went.
Yeah,
I'm thinking top down from this. I'm thinking, okay, that the system is set up to a point where everyone needs to be lied to from that level. But then the easier solution is let's make everyone lie to themselves, right? So they have developed a sort of a Skinner box, if you will, of a way to kind of have everyone communicate to themselves these lies that you're talking about, where it starts off small and it starts off to a point where you're just having people shill for Apple like for free. And what I mean by that is this: have you ever had somebody try to convince you that an error in an Apple product is actually a good thing for you, when you're thinking, how could that ever be a good thing for anybody? And they have some talking point, almost as if they work for the marketing team of Apple. You know what
right.
I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
it's
so
crazy.
it's to me it's
No, you go ahead. No, you go ahead.
to me it seems so inorganic when I hear somebody say it to me like, oh, this it's like that story that came out the other week about DeepSeek. There was blowback in the Western media saying,
Right.
well, actually there's this crazy game theory phenomena where there's too much efficiency leads to too much XYZ bad things.
Right.
And immediately that's to me the sniff test. I withdrew consent from that whole narrative because I was just so sucked out of the Bugman society. I'm like, you're not going to be able to convince me 1 + 1 = 3. I don't know what this. I can see this as damage control. I was there for 9/11. I know what blowback is. So it's like, this is not. You're not going to. I'm not going to buy this, right? And that's the same thing when somebody tells me, hey, actually, the fact that the videos are now shorter, or like smaller of a box on your phone, it's actually a good thing because you can, and whatever reason they give you, is something from Apple's marketing team. And they tell themselves that because they need to feel good about the fact that they're locked into that ecosystem. But you, me, and other good faith actors will say, no, it's just a bad design. And to credit Apple, they did fix it a couple weeks later. They said, hey, you know what, we took the feedback, we'll fix it back to the original format, but whatever. But you see where I'm going with this is people kind of shill these small lies for the companies because they feel an identity to that system. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, their whole identity, as you said, their whole identity is built into it, and it extends not just into the products that they're consuming, but their beliefs about the world itself. And this is how people get controlled. You know why the conspiracy theorists have been right about everything? And it was just more and more we're learning how they've been correct about every little thing. It's because these people are the anti-Bugman, right? They're the ones who ask the questions. Right. They hear the narrative, and if it makes sense to them, okay, maybe they'll buy it. But if it doesn't, then they're willing to ask questions. They're not just going to appeal to the experts. Anthony Fauci said, "Put on the mask." Well, first he said the masks don't matter, right? He said they don't matter. They're not effective at all. But then he said, "Put them on." And it's like the anti-Bugman is always like, I don't believe you at all. Like, I can tell that you're a liar. I'm skeptical to begin with. And I have a grounding in something greater than this, which whatever you tell me, I don't care about your credentials. I don't care about your expertise. I see that you're in the government. You're put into a position. You were appointed by some political person. Why should I believe anything you have to say? I simply don't by default. And it's up to you to prove to me that what you're saying is true. And if you don't do that to a satisfactory level, I'm out. I'm not going to believe it.
And I'm going to give some example here about what, and it's more like, some of you guys are going to say, well, you're just cherry picking to make yourself sound, intellectually consistent. Well, yes, I am, but I'm going to do it anyway. So here's what I'm going to say. The government does say good things sometimes, right? And I will say that, for example, if they tell you to put on your seatbelt, that's a good thing. You should do that. Yeah. Now, are they doing that for your best interests? I don't believe so, and we can get into that and why and all that, and insurance claims and stuff. I mean, I've got a brother in the industry, so he knows kind of how that works. Are they doing that for your best interest? Probably not, but is the result of it going to net positive for you and them? Yes, right? But that's an isolated thing that's unique to just that system. But you talk about the same kind of area and you say, hey, don't jaywalk. Now, that one, is that something that do you think about this for a second? And this might be a libertarian talking point, but hear me out before you turn off the video. Are you somebody who is too dumb to realize that you can look left, look right, and then decide that you are safe to cross a street? Do you need really law enforcement to tell you, hey, I'm going to give you a ticket because, yeah, you did it this time, but next time you try it, I'm giving you a ticket so that you have the feeling of, hey, I don't want to get a ticket, and that's going to eventually save my life from getting hit by a car. Now, ask yourself this. Are you 6 years old? Are you 9? Do you need to hold your grandma's hand before you walk? Are you holding her hand or is she holding yours? You see what I'm saying? And so, in my view, none of this stuff, a lot of this stuff is the same process, right? They make the law because they need some type of that's obviously like a money scheme, right? They need cash to fund their whatever, so they need ways to ticket people, or they need an excuse to pull people over and kind of investigate what's going on. And I see there's art involved in that. I get the whole process of, find what you can work with, but that's not for your benefit. So if you're somebody who thinks jaywalking laws are for my benefit, go ahead and turn off the video and go ahead and subscribe to Mr. Beast, plug into the system, buy your new iPhone. I get that. But if you are rejecting that at any point, keep watching, and we're going to give you some more content on this.
Yeah, no, that's a good example because it's so absurd, right? That the jaywalking thing. I remember when I was a kid, somebody once told, I don't know who it was, somebody once told me that you're supposed to stop, look, and also smell because you could smell the fumes from a car coming. Which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I don't understand how that, like, I'm not a shark in the water smelling blood. I'm not a bloodhound. I can't smell that freaking well. Like, what are you even telling me right now? You're telling me what they were telling me is not to trust my own eyeballs, that there's a car or there isn't a car, that maybe I'll smell it. Like, just a crazy thing to say.
Okay.
But it's a good example because it's so absurd that even people who are a bugman may try to defend this, and they may say something like, yeah, okay, this law, it may be a little overbearing, but if you break this law, you're more likely to break that law, and then society just crumbles to dust. So that's why you should respect every law, no matter how small or minor it may seem. That's why you should go along with it. But that's exactly the point. Like, you're supposed to be locked into this system of control. You're supposed to accept every little thing that they tell you so that you're a good and obedient bugman contributing to the hive. Right? Like, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you're supposed to not do. You're supposed to escape that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think with that example specifically, I think people think this is a perfect litmus test. If any of your friends are saying to you, say to you something like, you know what, actually the jaywalking law is a good thing, and here's why. No matter what they're going to say, I'm confident enough about this issue in particular that there's no good defense of it. So if they have any defense of it at all, they are working for the government for free. So they're for free working for the government.
They do it for free.
And exactly. And so this is something where you can immediately say, hey, you are somebody who's trying to be contrarian on purpose. And it sounds weird because we're always, the non-bugmen of the world are being called contrarians, right? But this bugman in particular on this issue is a bugman in my mind, or is a contrarian in my mind, because they're contrary to logic. They're on purpose trying to say, hey, you know what? All of my instincts tell me that this is a stupid law, but it has to be for some reason that I can't comprehend, so I'm going to just try to rationalize it, and I'm going to go contrary to you guys. It's like those people that are still, it's the year 2026 right now, right? 2028, whatever. It's like the people that are still talking about building 7, et cetera. And I'm not going to go too far with that, but you know those words and you can probably intuit what I'm saying. Yeah. So it's those public narrative folks who are just die by the sword. CNN was right all along. Like all those folks, your seatbelt laws, I get that, right? But your jaywalking laws, not so much. So litmus test for you viewers, if you want to check it out and just ask some of your friends, hey, what's the deal with the jaywalking laws? If they ever give you any pushback on it and say it's a good thing because this and that and the other, they're plugged in. They're dialed into the system. So, I mean.
Yep. Yeah, so, all right. So I want to, let's try to connect like the bugman and the overoptimization to some other things. I had an idea, we have a few things we can go over, but for example, I think we've talked a lot about consumerism. What about like at work?
Right.
Okay, so is there a culture of optimization or over optimization, bug manning, if you will, while you're at work? What does that look like in your view? Can you think of any examples?
So I'm going to give you two things. One, just one word: side hustle. So just put that aside and hear me out. Yeah. And put that in your brain and you put that in your RAM. So that's number one. Number two is hustle culture, like you pointed out today earlier. When somebody at work tells you, hey, you need to come in at 8:30 and then you need to stay here till 5:30, etc. And you go to work and you think, okay, I need to be a good boy and I need to look at my monitor and have no distractions and just appear like I'm very productive, etc. And every time my boss comes home, yeah, how's it going? You working on this? Doing that. You're playing the game. I get that. You're playing the game. But there's a point at which how much of your day is actually being productive, right? So figure out a way to not use the word productive against yourself. So again, we talked earlier at the beginning, top of the episode, people are trying to use different tools and software to make their situation more productive, but it ends up being less productive because they're trying to over-optimize instead of implement the via negativa philosophy. We'll get into that in a minute, but What is your thought on the via negativa philosophy, if you've ever heard of it?
Actually, no, I would love for you to elaborate on what that. Well, let's get into that now.
Okay.
Yeah, what is that?
We'll get into it now. So for those of you who just tuned in, the via negativa philosophy is something in my mind that is, when you have a problem in life, and I'm going to use a medical issue here as an example. When you have high blood pressure, for example, right, in today's society, the basic, most people, what they say is, you know what, hey, take some medication for that, and that way your blood pressure will go down, right? Okay. But then now, okay, so I got some sleeping issues. Okay, so take some sleep pills. Okay, I got some waking up issues. So take some waking up pills. See where I'm going with this, right? What the via negativa philosophy is, instead of adding something to your life to fix a problem, remove something from your life to fix that problem. So for the blood pressure example, it's obviously going to be remove some sugar from your diet, or remove something that's causing it, right? Instead of adding the statins on top of it.
Yeah.
So with this philosophy, instead of adding something to your life to fix a problem, you're going to remove something, and that's going to not compound issues, right? Because whenever you add something to an issue, you might have a separate side effect. Whereas if you remove something, you're less likely to have that issue. So using the via negativa philosophy on productivity issues, think of something. Is there anything that you can think of in your work environment where you thought, hey, I have a problem, I need to add some technology to this to figure out like how to solve that problem, and then had compounded an issue instead of just simply removing something. See where I'm going with this?
Yes. I think that's wonderful. I never heard that term before, but it's the way you explained it is great. I mean, I think you were telling me this story. I wanted to hear you talk about this on the pod. There's like a particular process, because I know you're a software programmer, so there's a particular like process of like, I don't know, adding notes or documentation, or just the way you write the code, where some certain people who are maybe a little more bugmaned out will leave a very long string of code, and it just doesn't need to be that way. And you sort of had an idea of how to optimize that process in using the via negativa that you just explained. So what was that specifically?
Right. For me, it wasn't actually me. It was more of when I was in college, I had like kind of a group project I was working on with people. And basically it came down to this. We were working on some deadline, and we had this issue. The goal was, hey, we need to specifically solve this quick sort algorithm, what have you, right? And I said, okay, let me do it this way. Let's just use one file, and it'll be totally fine, right? But I had a couple of classmates that were like, hey, why don't we make 10 different files, 14 files, and kind of extend different classes in that file and make it look beautiful as a file structure. And I know this is going to sound kind of weird for some of you, but to me, I'm just like, hey, let's just use one file, because we just need to make it work, right? Like, I don't need to overcomplicate it. And a couple of guys on my team were like, yeah, I don't think we need to make this complicated. But this guy on our team said, hey, we're not going to get an A unless we kind of show that it's complex. So let's add some external libraries. So we're downloading different packages from different libraries that are external to what we need, right, for our small use case. And the problem is, I see what he's trying to do, and I get that. And he's actually smart. He's correct in some ways. But the fact that he's bloating this technology stack with things that he thinks are great, because he probably got this information from either Reddit or maybe one of his other professors. It doesn't actually make. We're so far away from the goal. The goal was, hey, make this algorithm quick for the sorting. And now we're in this land of, we're having a debate on whether or not we should use this or this framework for this package or that package, when we could have just been done with the whole thing. We could have been done with it already before we started the conversation. So this Bugman in particular would just implement solutions that weren't needed, over-optimize that stuff. And I'm sure this happens to some people at work nowadays, but for me, it was just like a college thing. But these people, they just like to bugmanize their solutions and the engineering stacks, instead of just simply saying, hey, the user wants this, let's just give them that. They're not going to think about what your tech stack is. You know what I'm saying? They're just going to give you money if it works. So it's like, that's kind of where I'm going with that. So
do what works. Yeah. So so we're on the topic of like productivity, and I think that, you know, we're talking about work, but another aspect of productivity, of course, is like fitness. Okay, and we've spoken a little bit about like Sam Sulek before on this podcast, and just as a refresher, you know, Tony and I are big fans of Sam Sulek, specifically because he has this. I think he probably embodies this like via negativa philosophy, right? Right. Which is where keep things simple. So Sam Sulek, everything about him is super stripped down. I mean, even his body fat, right? Like, he's absolutely
even his body, yeah.
So so like just the way he produces videos, just the simplest thing ever. He's literally in his car, just talking, right? Just talking, and he's one of the most popular fitness influencers that there is, maybe the most popular, and especially among the demographic that you and I are probably speaking to the most, which is young men, right? I think it's specifically for this reason. Even if he hasn't articulated this or nobody else has, he has this way of just getting right to the point, like getting to the thing that's going to work. You know, I've said before, like Sam Sulek is not a guy who's going to sit there and read scientific studies to you. He's not gonna worry about the latest data on, you know, REM or you know, whatever. I don't know. I can't think of an example, but he's not focused on this particular data and like gathering information.
Right.
He's just going out into the world, seeing what works, and applying it to himself. And this is a perfect example of how any type of productivity that you're involved in should be something just like that. You get it the ball rolling with whatever means you have necessary, as simple, as poor as it might be to begin with. You get the ball rolling and you start to optimize over time on your own, using your own eyes and ears. You know, like I don't need to trust the experts, because the experts they're speaking so abstractly or about such specific things that it's really not helpful to me. Like if I even tried to implement that, I'd be putting the cart before the horse, you know. And Sam Sulek is a perfect example of what not to do in those situations. I mean, what to do.
No, and I think a couple things you said. One is the experts, right? So Sam Sulek in particular, the experts are in some way distracting him from what he needs to do, because he is the science. So what I mean by that is he is the experiment. Okay, so if you just tuned into the channel and you let's say if you watched episode 4 about shipping fast, that is shipping fast. He is putting a video in his car. He's just jumping. If you look at he's a perfect experiment, because you look at his channel, and he even talks about this on some long form interviews. He said to himself, "Hey, I wanted to put this stuff up on YouTube and stuff, but I didn't feel satisfied with any of these videos, and I just kept recording, deleting, and then I realized there's no real way to iterate if I don't have any feedback. So I just said, you know what, whatever, I'm just going to post." So he finally posted a video. And he got some feedback, good and bad. Obviously, some of the bad stuff is more helpful than the good stuff in some cases, because it'll tell you, hey, what do I need to do for analyzations? What do I need to do to iterate, right? So he iterated, and he got a bit of different camera. He got a better mic and stuff, and he eventually is at now a point where he's definitely got a system dialed, right? He works out. He's in the car. He's maybe even jumped. I don't even know what day it is when I watch his videos, because he's jumbled up at a point where but it works. You see what I'm saying? Like sometimes he's recording like after the cardio, before the food, but then the next day he does an all day of eating and then also legs, but doesn't show legs until then. But my point is, it's a great system, and I love that I don't know exactly what day it is when I'm watching him. And I think he's just built up such a good following because he is truly to that nature in my mind of anti-bugmanism. He's almost a MGTOW in some way, because he's going his own way, but he's not overemphasizing that part of it. He's just literally doing his own thing, not to impress anybody, but because it's his own system. And he's not taking like you said earlier, like the RPE system. He's not working about, I need to figure out like the best science and studies on reps in reserve, eccentric, all this. Right. He's just saying what works, what makes me bigger. Let me find the biggest guy in my gym and ask him what he does. Let me look at Tom Platt's videos for 6 hours and say, how do I do squats for like Tom Platt's, And now you've got a guy who's maybe going to win the Arnold at some point. I mean, he's really an inspirational guy to watch, and I love that you pointed him out as an example, because he is exactly the opposite of a bugman, in my opinion. He's just somebody who gets after it, and I think people need to be more like him in the perspective of getting away from the system. So, talk to me about what you think about Sam Sulek and why he gets it right. How does Sam Sulek get it correct?
Yeah. So you said it best when you said he's trying to get out of the system. So the whole point of our maneuver project, and pretty much every conversation we have, is like diagnosing these problems of society and helping you understand why and how to escape from it. And you do need to escape from it, because it's all designed. I mean, part of what we're talking about with this over-optimization is that society itself has been optimized to keep you here in that circling the hive, and every little thing is connected. So the way you're expected to behave at work, the way you're expected to behave on the dating apps, the fact that you're even supposed to use the dating apps, right? The fact that you're supposed to take the opinions of experts into account before you start anything. Every aspect of this is connected, and it's all in part of the same system. You have to get out of it And the way you do it is by shutting it down. Shut off your eyes and ears from that system, that machine that's been designed to keep you controlled. Escape it, right? I mean, to be cliche, it's that you're escaping the matrix, but that's exactly what it is. It's a matrix.
It's cliche for a reason.
Millions of different axes. Yeah, it's cliche for a reason because it's 100% true. So Sam Sulek, like you said, he's the anti-Bugman because he's not plugged into any of that crap. And if he is, he doesn't talk about it. It's not really relevant. You know, you engage in some stuff here and there. You watch an anime, you know, you hop on Marvel Rivals once a week, whatever. We all have our vices, right? You're not going to be perfect. But the key is that you're not beholden to the system. You simply use it for what's there and take what you can get from it and make yourself the system. Right? You're turning yourself into the system. I am the experiment in my own life. No expert is going to help me understand how to live my life best. Only I can do that for myself. So I have to make myself the experiment, go gather the information and implement it myself.
And we're not saying go watch Sam Sulek's videos and do exactly what he does to get ahead in life. We're saying use his mindset. Go watch Sam Sulek's videos and understand his mindset and go and say, hey, I've got a home gym behind me, as you can see. I'm jumping into that, right? Like, I'm not going to jump into the Reddit fitness of the world and say I need to do 13 sets exactly because 14 is too much, 12 is not enough. Has to be 81% of my 1 rep max, but it has to be an estimated 1 rep max, not my actual 1 rep max, because if I do my 1 rep max, it's going to make me too burnt out to do the 13 reps. So I've got to estimate that 1 rep max. And that has to be an estimation based on my 4 rep max, which needs to be, you see what I'm saying, where I'm going with this? It's way over optimized. And it's way there's no way that could be scientific to me. That's just all. I don't want to say mumbo jumbo because that sounds like nothing. That doesn't sound like a word, but that's all that is. That's on purpose to kind of distract you from what the reality is that if you add 5 pounds to the barbell and then the next session you come in and you do the same thing with 5 more pounds, you're gonna get bigger. Okay. Because it's worked thousands of times. Because the biggest guy at your gym added 5 pounds every time he came into the gym, and until he got to the point where he did that at some point, right? And that's as simple as it is. So keep it simple, stupid, via negativa, all these buzzwords. These are all the ideologies that I would embrace and get away from the Bugmanism and unplug from the world in some ways. Don't go your own way like a MGTOW, but unplug from the Bugman aspect, just like Sulek.
Unplug, yeah. And I think a key point that I want to make on this is like, ask yourself who's benefiting from these systems that are in place. So if there's people who are like, you know, if I'm going to go do squats, I need to find out what the experts have to say about how to do squats, right? Who's benefiting from that? Okay. You may think it's yourself because, I'm going to learn from somebody who's an expert, right? And that sounds awesome. Of course, everybody wants to learn from the best in whatever field they're doing. But ultimately what you're doing is you're helping that expert remain an expert, which is what their economic incentive is. Their economic incentive is to be able to hold that over you and say, hey, you can't do this on your own. You need information from somebody like me who's going to sell it to you and make a bunch of money. And if you go try to do it on your own, you're going to screw it up. You're going to get injured. You're not going to get the best results. You know, you're not going to get absolutely as shredded as you possibly could. You're not going to get stronger. You need to listen to what I have to tell you. And that way, that's how you're going to get the best results. So just follow me and make sure you hit the like and subscribe and you pay me money because that's going to keep me afloat. And then I'll be able to continue to help you, you know. And you don't need any of that crap. What you need to do is you need to go into it and figure it out yourself. You're not going to sit there watching a YouTube video on how to do squats. It's not going to teach you how to do squats. It's not going to teach you anything. Once you've done a few squats, maybe then you can get a little out of it. But if you've never done it before, the only thing, the biggest jump and experience that you can get is to go there and actually start trying it yourself. And then you'll have a little bit of information to work with at least. So then you can maybe glean a little bit from those expert things. But everything in your life has to be like that. Just ship it. Get involved. Go do it yourself. Get into the world. And that's how you're going to actually progress in any aspect of your life.
No, and I think when I was in college, I learned about the Cauchy-Euler formula, and I might be butchering that because it was so long ago. But you hear these formulas that come out of basically two people's names, combine them, and that's now this new theory. So as I became an adult, I actually became I became perceptive or became kind of a victim of the David Pacman, Stephen Bonnell fallacy. I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by that is. because you don't know something, because you haven't ever done something, they say it does not mean you don't know that thing, right? So I was like a bugman at some point in this aspect. I would hear that and say, hey, that's actually right. I don't need to have experienced something to be able to explain that thing. So, and the example that they and the intellectuals of the world, quote unquote, will use is saying, hey, imagine a thought experiment where you're in a room and it's all black and white. Everything's black and white in the entire house. It's a controlled experiment, and you're born in that house, and you grow up 10 years, 15 years in that house. Everything's black and white. But you read everything there is to know about color, like from a physics perspective. Like, how does it work? What is it, this color spectrum, all those details. So you know more about color from a details perspective than anybody in the world, right? But you've never seen it. Now, can you explain what color is to anybody in a true way? Like, do you actually know it? So the answer that they give as intellectuals, quote unquote, is that yes, you can, because you don't need to have experienced that thing to know that thing. So I was a victim of, hey, I'm bugmanning out and saying, that's this, so much of this for that. And I said, that's so smart and so insightful. But then I slowly started to realize over time that that's not correct. And the example that was given to me was, hey, how do you become, what is it like to be married? What is that like, right? Before I was married, I didn't know really, I didn't have a good answer for that, but I had in theory and all this, all this, you read all this divorce rates and all this stuff, statistics, but then once you get married, you kind of know, oh, this is what's going on, or oh, this is what it is. So that's just one small example, but you can think of anything in your life like where you definitely know something. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because you said, I don't know exactly what's going on with it because I haven't done it yet, but I can kind of venture a guess. You see what I'm saying with this?
Yeah. So the nice thing about having like a coherent worldview is you understand that everything is connected. Everything is like a phrase that we use a lot. And it's specifically because there are patterns in this world. The world itself, in my view, is actually just patterns. This is what we're experiencing at every level. A good example I brought up to you the other day is like the golden ratio. It appears in every scale. It appears at the smallest scales and it appears at the largest scales. And this is just one example of an infinite number of patterns that interact with each other at every level, at every scale, in every possible way that you could conceive of. And what that means is once you understand that, and once you start to identify these patterns, you understand how to connect them to things that you've never even had anything to do with. You hear about a new thing, and somebody tries to give you a perspective on it, and it just feels discordant. Like you understand that like this doesn't fit with the world that I know, the world that I understand. Like the way you're explaining it to me, I can tell is like twisted or warped, and there's something going on. Maybe it's your personal interest in this. Maybe there's some consumerism going on. Maybe there's a political ideology you're trying to thrust upon me. I understand that just by listening to what you're saying and how you're saying it. And that's one of the key projects that you and I have here is we're trying to help relate this more universal perspective. And the only way you can get there is by having the foundation. And the foundation is the philosophy of like a connection to something deeper than this stupid bugman society that we have set up. It goes so far beyond that. And you'll never get to the bottom of it. I mean, it's not like you and I have a perfect worldview, of course not. But we're going much deeper because you and I automatically drill down into these subjects and we automatically connect it to other things at the same time. So you start to understand this, and then it makes you more resilient. It makes you more resistant to these types of things that are being sold to you. I mean, everything's being sold to you at all the times. You got to know when to be immune to the salesman. That's a key thing. It's like understand when you're being sold something, whether it's an ideology, whether it's a product, whether it's somebody's expertise, so that they can remain an expert. You got to be resistant to all these types of things. So it's kind of the key point of this conversation. I think.
And the reason I bring that kind of thought experiment up is to relate to what you said, is that when you're being sold a YouTube video on how to do squats, it's nice to kind of lounge out and say, let me just watch this, right? But 1 or 2 is enough, okay? You don't need to watch 100 videos on how to do a squat before you jump onto the barbell and just try it, right? And what you were saying earlier is learn by doing instead of learn by learning. And that's what I'm trying to get at too, is that I used to be naive and think you could watch 100 squat videos and never do a squat and then know how to do a squat, because I would just use the David Pacman, Stephen Bonnell fallacy. And I think, and the reason I'm calling that is that it's what this rationalist, materialist kind of worldview ultimately leads to, right? Because you have to kind of come up with some explanation for how to know something or how to know knowledge. At that level, you're breaking it down to some point where you're so far away from humanity, like you're taking humanity out of like just something as simple as knowledge. And I get it, that's philosophy, and I love that part of it. But we're not going to jump into that, and it's out of scope for the video, and it's out of scope for almost every conversation. You don't need to be the Jordan Peterson aspect of saying, well, what is knowledge? I love that. Well, there's a room and place for that, right? But not when you're trying to learn how to do squats. You don't need to say, well, hold on, to know a squat, well, I have to know what knowing is, right? At that point, you just don't want to do squats. I get that. But the reason I bring that up is because you made a very good point. You don't need to watch it. Yeah, you don't need exactly. And you don't need to watch 100 videos. You just need to watch 1, 2, maybe 3 at the most, and then get under the barbell. Maybe film yourself and then upload it on. You can upload it even on Reddit. Some people will be, good. Reddit is bad for a lot of things, but some people will be able to give you some good feedback on at least the squat videos. But back over to you. Yeah. What is something where you think people, instead of doing, they want to watch because is it because they fear that jumping into that thing, or is it because they want to is it more comfortable to just watch?
Yeah, I think of a good example, and this will help us segue a little bit too to another aspect of this over-optimization bugman situation that we're in here. So a good example that I can think of is like, there's videos of guys online like going and approaching women, right? And like it's a fairly popular style of video. Like I went and just try to rizz up certain girls and get their numbers, right? And this is like this is an actual style of content that like you get young guys who have never done this in real life, and they've never maybe had any real dating experience, and they're scared of girls because girls are scary, especially when you haven't had any experience with them at all. So it's fun to watch somebody who is more confident and more smooth go up and sort of accomplish what you wish you could accomplish. And then they may even be like taking notes, like, oh, write that line down. That's a good line. I need to use that the next time I do this. And they never actually do it, right? And that's the thing, is even when they go try to do it, they fall on their face because this is not something that's you don't have a formula for this until you've built up a strategy of your own, right? And again, I said this at the beginning of the episode, but when you don't understand one particular thing, you also don't understand yourself. And I think this applies perfectly to dating, because if you're going to go try to talk to girls, you're going to absolutely fail miserably unless you know about yourself. You need to know a few different things. So to be practical about this, right? You need to know, number one, what makes you attractive to women? What are women like about you? Okay, and this is not universal. There's a few things that are universal, like height, for example. Most women are attracted to height. But if you're not tall, that's out, right? Humor. Okay, are you funny? Are you naturally like a funny guy? That's great. That's going to be attractive. But not everybody's funny. Okay, so if that's out, that's out. Are you very charismatic? Can you get people talking about themselves? Can you get them engaged in the conversation? Some people have that. Some people don't, right? Do you have cool interests? Do you have a very cool job that you can talk about? Are you rich? Can you like flaunt your wealth? These are things that make you attractive, but none of them apply to every single guy. So if you're going to go out and try to talk to girls and try to get a girlfriend and eventually have a wife and have 2.1 kids and fulfill your mission to like populate the freaking earth, which is your main goal in life, then the number one thing you need to know is about yourself. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? When I go and approach a girl, what is the thing? How am I going to try to steer the conversation? How am I going to demonstrate my value to her? And here's another important thing. How am I going to recognize that I'm speaking to a woman to whom this is actually attractive? Because that's the other thing. You may have a lot of attractive traits, but you're not going to get every girl. Not every woman is going to be interested in those kinds of things. So you have to be able to recognize quickly, like, hey, this is my kind of girl. Like, she's going to like me, and I'm going to play into this or that so that she likes me even more. So you see, these are all very subtle, very difficult things to really get in tune with. And you'll never get that from watching another guy go and do it, because he's got his thing. He's figured it out for himself. And you're not going to be able to sit there and write down notes about his pickup lines and then go just apply them and then succeed. No, you're going to look like an idiot. You're going to fail miserably. And in fact, it'll probably make it worse, because you're going to fail so badly that you're going to feel humiliated and you're not going to want to try again, right? So that's a perfect example of like, you got to strip that down and just go learn by doing, go do it yourself. What do you think about that?
Right. And kind of just to prove your point, I want to give you an example as far as the YouTube videos. You talk about these YouTubers that are going out there and they're saying, hey, I'm going to pick up women. That's my whole content, right? So to double click on that, I think you only need to watch one of those videos because it's all the same formula, right? And you only need to write down one thing from those videos. And that thing is, none of this matters. And what I mean by that is, in scope locally, none of this matters. So what they are all doing and they have all internalized already is that it doesn't matter what this person says to me, what this woman says, no, yes or no to me, because there's 100 more today that I'll be talking to, not total. There's 1,000, maybe 100,000 more that I'll talk to total, because that's their job. But for you, I think as an individual, if you're thinking, hey, I need to optimize the process of talking to women, it's okay to think that you need to optimize it, but that leads to that scary path of over optimization, and that's going to be stopping you from even starting the thing, right? Mm-hmm. So to ship fast on that, you just need to walk up to one of them and say anything that comes to your mind, because that's what's going to happen long term with them anyway. It's how you feel. It's just your own kind of personality. So you don't need to craft the perfect message. You don't need to craft the perfect pickup line. You do need to set yourself up, and this is perfect segue into what we'll get into, but you need to set yourself up in a way to where you are that person that's interesting, right? You have that 1 and 2, your fitness and your career is already in order, so to the point where you are interesting to talk about. You have stuff going on in your life that can be relatable, that can be resonated with. You have a career, so you have some stability in your life. It's hard I'm not telling you not to talk to anybody until 1 and 2 is set up, but I'm saying that when you do approach these women, if 1 and 2 are already set up, it's going to be a lot easier to make 3 happen. So where I'm going with this is build a foundation at first, and then 3 is going to be easier. So the people on YouTube that say, hey, I need to do all this and optimize all this and that, it's exactly like you said. It gets you stuck in this loop of it has to be perfect or else I can't ship it. And it turns into a point where you started watching a video on how to do something at first because you genuinely needed advice on that thing. But then it became a hobby to kind of you're interested in the content. And now you're not even watching his videos anymore about women. You're clicking on his vlog of how he went to Hawaii, and you're more interested in this persona, and that's how they get you. And I think taking it back over to you, how do you optimize that aspect of your life just enough to a point where it's not over optimization, but you do need a little bit of entry level optimization?
Yeah, and we're supposed to be talking about talking to women, right?
Right.
Yeah. So circling a little bit back to what I was saying. So women is like the most subtle, fine art type of skill that you're gonna need. Right? I mean, there are other arts and skills that you could choose to develop, but this is the one thing that every man universally is going to need to figure out on his own. And I think the key to that, as we've been saying, is to number one, just go and do it. Okay, but the second thing is what is the purpose? Why are you doing it? Okay, so that's a really big thing, I think. Like, if you're just lonely and you're just seeking companionship and validation, right off the bat, I think you're on the wrong foot. Okay, and I think that the phrase that we're gonna try to get you to internalize is 1 + 2 = 3, and that's like the maneuver type of solution, right? Okay, so number one is your fitness. So are you healthy, in shape? And number 2 is going to be your career and your stability. Okay, not necessarily that you need to be rich or you need to be jacked. That's not really what we're saying. But the point is, are you healthy and are you stable enough to support a family and to actually get married? Now, 1 + 2 is going to equal 3, and 3 is, dating and relationships. So I'd say that the number one tip that I would give you is, why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you feel that 1 and 2 are at the right place? Now, to drill specifically into what you asked me is how do you know that? Like, when is it enough that you can start to try to go for number 3? I think that there's not going to be a real solid line. It's going to be are you on the path at least towards number 2 and towards number 1? Are you pretty close, or you feel hey, getting to my goals is sort of just around the corner, or it's at least within sight? I know what path I'm on. I'm walking the steps. I think as long as you have that, you're good. I think you can start going for 3 right at that point. And that's going to come pretty early. I mean, that even might be just you're in college, or you're in your trade school, or maybe you're already in your job, and you're not necessarily at the point where you could support a family by yourself, but you have a path and you know what path you're going to be going down. I think that that's really about all you need. And then you can start going towards number 3. That's what I would say.
No, and I think the Bugman answer to this is, let me just download Tinder and pay the whatever monthly fee to get the premium edition or whatever.
Yeah.
Let me just add all the bells and whistles to stack on, because it's I can't dating is so optimized that I can't even take part in that system, right?
Yeah.
And these people are saying, hey, they're telling you that they're dehumanizing the aspect of walking up to a woman and saying, what's your name?
Yeah.
They've actually dehumanized it to a point where now it's monetized, it's paywalled. That's what they're making you think, at least. And I think there's some key and there's some there's some art to finessing, just being able to walk up to not even just a woman, but if you can't even walk up to a person, a man even at a Target and ask him, hey, where's the batteries? Some people that are watching this have never asked that question. They just they don't even have the confidence to even ask where the bathroom is. I've actually been in this Target with somebody where they literally said, I've got to use the restroom, but I don't know where it is. And I'm like, okay, well, let's ask somebody. And they're like, I don't want to ask anybody. Let's just go home. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, are you serious?
I'll hold it. Yeah.
Are you seriously going to hold it?
Yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
What's going on with you? And this is normalizing. This is being normalized. So it's almost like this Bugman world of like self-checkout, withdraw consent from society, MGTOW, in that world of, they've even convinced you that they don't even need to check your groceries out. They've even convinced you with the self-checkout to say, hey, that's more optimal, go do it yourself. And I'm not bashing self-checkout. Like, it's definitely, if it's for you, it's for you, right? I'm totally for self-checkout. Because if you go into it and like there's a big line, hey, there's nobody at the self-checkout, I'm just gonna go self-checkout, I've got 4 things, boom, done. But if you have like a bunch of like different vegetables and you don't want to like start typing all the names into the vegetables and do all that, just go to the regular checkout line. They're going to do it for you. That's what you're paying for. When you go to the grocery store, you're paying extra for the groceries because baked into that system is somebody to check your groceries out. But in 10, 15 years from now, they're not going to have that. So enjoy that while it lasts, and make fun of me for being a boomer and saying, oh, self-checkout, whatever. But that's my point. You're paying for that as a service, right? So why not just take advantage of it?
Yeah. And so I want to maybe ask specifically, I think it's good. It's within scope a little bit. And I think maybe it's a good time for us to sort of double click on this. So you mentioned like the Bugman response to the over optimization of dating is going to be something like, hey, I'm not rich and I'm not jacked, so therefore I can't date, right? And it's not going to work for me. And now I've already said like, hey, you don't necessarily need to be there. You just kind of have to have your ultimate goals within sight, within reach. And that's good enough, which is not perfection. You don't need to be perfect. You just sort of need to have a goal and a path that you're on. And so I wanted to ask you this. So let's get specific here, because maybe this is a good time to give like some more specific advice. So what did you find like worked for you? Like when you were dating women and you wanted to meet them and talk to them, obviously, we weren't like sitting there watching videos to learn these tips.
Right.
So what did you specifically have to implement that you found made you more attractive, and how do you play that up? How does that go?
Yep. Yeah, and for me specifically, I think I got lucky in some aspects, but the point about luck is when an opportunity presents itself, if you're ready, take it, and it'll be easy for you to take that. Yep. But for me, I again, wasn't even thinking about, once I stopped thinking about the frame of everything I need to do is in the lens of optimizing the dating world of it, things sort of kind of just fell into my lap, right? And what I mean by that is I built up hobbies in my life for the sake of, hey, I need to figure out, for example, climbing, right? I built up, rock climbing hobbies and saying, hey, I need to get better at this. And this is more fun for me to focus on how do I get better at rock climbing, right? And so I go to the climbing gym a couple times a week, and you just start to kind of analyze it and you optimize that. And I did a little bit of over optimization on that. I'm not going to lie, but I recognize that, hey, I'm over optimizing it, but let me just dial it back and regularly optimize it. So I finally got to a point where you go into the climbing gym and you have this certain level of confidence in you. And now you're in the little element of, hey, I'm kind of in this gym. I kind of know things. You know what I'm saying? People start to notice these type of things at the gym. So I'm in the climbing gym and I'm kind of just, talking. I just see this girl there and I'm saying, hey, and I'm not even thinking of it as I need to gamify this. It was just a natural, this other person at the climbing gym, and I'm just going to see if I can just see what she's into. So I started talking to her just casually. And, one thing led to another, and now we're married and we're about to have a son. So to me, it's like, it's almost like I wasn't trying to do any kind of dating things. And that's kind of what the message is stop trying, almost. And there's an asterisk there, because you do need to try a little bit, like take a shower, do all that stuff and make sure your hygiene's in check. But stop thinking of it as I need this to be the way, the conduit, and if to meet women, right? Yeah. For me, it was just, I'm just doing things that make me happy. And in turn, I found somebody at that hobby that also thinks that things that make her happy are similar to what I do. And therefore, she was attracted to me in some ways because I was good at that hobby, but also could kind of relate that to other things. And we kind of had just situations that where we both mutually grew together. And so it wasn't even, I didn't even have the any kind of bandwidth to be insecure, right? I'm already in an element where I'm comfortable, the climbing gym, right? And so for you, kicking it back over to you, it doesn't have to be a climbing gym, but what is your climbing gym of that, right? It's like, maybe it's the bowling alley. Maybe I'm really into bowling, right? And I meet a woman there, right? Of course, and again, there's ratios in this. Like sometimes you go to a bowling alley and it's 96% men, and the one girl there is just works there, and you don't want to bother her. I get that. But if you're in a hobby where it's 60-40 or something like where it's 60-40 men, women, talk to them, right? Because they're there and it's just for the hobby, etc. And then you might find somebody you like. And that's why last week we mentioned the coworker thing. And this is the system telling you not to, find love. And I think you need to ignore the system in a lot of cases, and this is one of those points. So back over to you. What do you think a good example of your climbing gym, if you will, for that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not married, so I don't have like a clean story like that to tell. But the places that I go is like church. I play a lot of disc golf. I go to the gym, and it's exactly what you're talking about. Like if I meet somebody in these settings, there's no real room for insecurity because I already feel like I belong there, and it makes the conversation much easier. I wish I could tell a story like I met this woman and we got married and brought to have a kid. Like that'd be much simpler to relate to. But the only thing I can say is like I'm just going to echo what you said. Remove the insecurity. And the only way you're going to do that is by really finding out what makes you comfortable, and then optimizing for that. So you're not over optimizing it, but playing into that. And this is why I was saying earlier, like it's an art. It's very subtle because even as you said, like you're going to talk to this girl, and it's not as though you go up to her with this weight on your shoulders, like, okay, I need to nail this interaction. I need this to go absolutely perfectly so that she'll fall in love with me and we get married and she has my kids. That wasn't really on your mind. In the back of your mind, there was probably something like, hey, she's cute, she's attractive, I'd like to get to know her a little better. And like I certainly wouldn't mind it if she likes me back, that'd be pretty cool too. But that wasn't like weighing on you as you went up and spoke to her. You just went up and spoke to her naturally, right? And you find out. And here's one thing, a point I want to make to young guys listening. If you're single and you're wondering like, how do I get girls? How do I get good at this? I'd say the number one thing is internalize the fact that you're trying to vet them as much as they're trying to vet you. So when you go up to a new girl, what's on your mind should not be, I need to present myself perfectly. I need to just nail this and I need to have the perfect pickup line and transition it and get her number, and then we got to text for this amount of time and I can only send texts that are this long, and don't use emojis and all these rules that are in your head. This is all bugman shit. This is all red pill, bugman, overoptimization. And you have to escape that and just understand that like, hey, I'm trying to get to know her. Is she actually somebody that I want to spend time with? And you see how that shifts your mindset right away towards like, it's me that's interviewing her in a way, right? Like I'm trying to get to know her, and that automatically is gonna give you such this huge boost of confidence. And I think there's one thing you take away from it. That's it. That's the number one thing for me.
And that's gonna differentiate you from all of the other like people out there that are letting her interview them. And I love that you use that example because I'm gonna obviously make this kind of analogy here, which you underhanded me to. But when you're looking for a job, and you do an interview at a job, let's say you have an interview at a company. If you're the guy who spends more time interviewing them than they interview you, you have the job, because you're already framing the conversation as if you're working there, right? And they are tired of just running. Let's say they interview 10 people, and they run the same script on the first 9, and they ask them like a bunch of questions, and at the end of the interview, they say, "Do you have any questions for me?" And they think of some little bait questions like, "What is the values of your company? What do you guys? What's your diversity policy looking like?" No. If you walk in there and minute 0, you frame it, and this is what Red Pill gets right, is you have to have everything in frame, but they think about it in a way where you have to over-optimize it. But I'm saying if you just simply apply the frame like this, where your mindset isn't even I'm going into an interview, the mindset is I'm interviewing companies to see which one is my best choice. So just like you said, with the dating world, you're trying to figure out, you're vetting them, right? And so for the interview process, if you walk in and you say, the first thing you do, for example, say, hey, I love your company, and I want to kind of, I was not love your company, but hey, I was interested in, the listing and how it relates to my old job is this, and I'm kind of curious right off the gate. If you say, I'm kind of curious, what are you guys doing for this, and how does it relate to what I did here? If you just immediately right off the gate frame it like that, you're going to jump into a 15, 20-minute little small talk about what the job is already. They're already explaining to you their job, and they probably didn't even explain that to the other 9 guys. So it's like, you're already in basically, right?
Yeah.
And by the end of the interview, you're talking salary. You're talking salary at the end of the interview. You're saying, hey, like, so they're already, they don't even have to interview. They're not even going to run their script. They're just going to be vibing with you, vibing if you want to. So same thing with women. I think if you frame it to a point where you're interviewing them, that already differentiates you in my mind from all the other bugmen that say like, oh, I'm going to try to let them interview me. And I think it's really important for me kind of explain, it's not about dating. It's about human being connections, right? So if you're just so at that level where you can't even talk to an employee at Target and ask them where the bathroom is, you need to get that up to speed first, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't walk up to a woman if you can't ask somebody where the bathroom is, right? Like you can't do it. So, but if you're past that level and you're doing that middle tier phase where you're over optimizing and saying like, let them interview me. No, you need to frame it like what you were saying is where you're not even thinking of it as a dating opportunity. You're thinking of it as a human interaction, and you're saying, hey, maybe down the line you realize, wait, actually this person actually kind of fits the bill for me, right? So it's not something you need to think about. It's in my mind something that's more of a feeling, and I'm normally not a feelings person, but this is a perfect example of when to invoke that. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. So I have one little psychology tip that I want to give to the viewers right now, and it relates to what you were just saying. So this goes for everybody, but especially women, I think. People want to be seen, but they want to be seen the way that they see themselves. Okay, so what exactly does that mean? It means that as a human being, you understand that you're not perfect. You know your flaws, and you know them very well, and you think about them much more often than you think about the things that are good about yourself, right? So apply this to women. If she's an attractive girl, she knows she's attractive, right? And she's probably happy about it. But what she's thinking about a lot more are her insecurities, about the things that she doesn't like about herself. And what she's looking for, again, to relate it to my original point, she wants a guy who sees her for who she is and likes her anyway, right? Which means you're identifying flaws, right? And this is sort of why like negging works. And I'm not necessarily going to advocate for that, but I am going to tell you that you need to understand that this is a full human being that you're dealing with. This is a regular person with flaws, who sins every single day, who struggles with certain things. And when you can demonstrate that you see that, hey, I see that you're just a regular person, like Tony's saying, you're differentiating yourself from most of the other men. Because what most other men are going to do is they're going to come up to her and they're going to zero in on the things that they like about her, that they see as like perfect. Like she's so pretty. Oh, she made me laugh once, so she's funny. Oh, she gets good grades, so she's smart. You know, they're going to zero in on these things. And in her head, she's going to be like, I'm really not that funny. I'm just quoting something I saw on the internet. I'm really not that smart. I just spend a lot of time on it, and I'm really anal about doing my homework, right? This is what's going to go through her head. So when she has guys that are just showering her with this positive attention, that's what she doesn't like. She doesn't want that. She wants a guy who's going to see her for who she is. Like, yeah, I'm a little dumb. Yeah, I'm kind of lazy. Yeah, I struggle with this and that and this. And he sees that about me, and I like that about him because he sees that, but he's giving me the attention anyway.
Right.
And it's like you're giving them, and this is true for everybody, which is why Tony was right when he's relating it to like a job interview. But especially with women, you want to give them something to live up to, like a challenge, you know, some way to like move into your frame. Like, hey, this is what I'm looking for in a wife. This is what I want. You know, do you meet that? Are you really that? You know, I'm not sure. Right. I'm gonna have to get to know you a little better to find out. They like that. It's like exciting. You know, it's exciting to them because they're like, hey, I can prove myself. This is something to move into. I want to be in his frame. I don't want him to come to me and shower me with all this attention and love me right off the bat, because that's insincere. And they can sense that, and it is insincere. You may think to your mind, like, I'm not trying to be insincere. I'm not trying to manipulate anybody. But what you're really doing is you're putting her on a pedestal, and you don't know her like that to do that. And even if you did know her like that, you'd understand that that's not appropriate. Like, nobody deserves to be put on that kind of pedestal. She's a human being. She's flawed, just like you. Keep that in mind, right, and you're going to go a lot further.
Right. And what the red pill gets wrong about dating in particular is that they quadruple click on the beginning, and that's all they focus on.
Right.
And that's where most of the conversation is about dating. It's the beginning. It's how do I start it? But nobody really talks about the middle and obviously the end, but the middle of dating is the most important conversation that's not being had. And I think it's very, very important to say, hey, the beginning is important because I need to figure out how to start it, but how do I maintain it? We talked about vetting and maintaining earlier, but how do I maintain a relationship with women, right? And if you start it, that question is answered by also if you start it correctly, it'll be easier to maintain. So if you start it in this false pretense of, I need to over-optimize myself with pickup lines, etc., you're not going to be able to maintain that because you're not going to be able to keep that image up the entire relationship, right?
Yeah.
So almost to a point where if you're just naturally being your normal state, your normal self, and then you kind of happen to meet somebody in a hobby style format, it's going to be a lot easier for you to maintain the middle and then the end up, not the end, but like maintain the middle and build up the relationship to a point where it's potentially marriage, because you don't have to put on the mask every day, right? And when I say the mask, I'm not talking about the Fauci mask. I'm talking about the mask of I'm this person that I try to do to make you attracted to me, but I'm actually not that person every day. I have to wake up, etc. But if you just wake up and you're just yourself, and you've kind of crafted a world where she's chasing yourself, she's actually chasing you as your natural self, you're locked in, right?
Yes.
And so, what I want to kick over to you is the question of, in particular, why do they focus on the beginning and not the middle?
Yeah, I think it's exactly for the reason you said. This is the example of over-optimization when it comes to dating. We've related it to work and fitness and even just like ideology and politics. But when it comes to dating, over-optimization looks like what you just said. It looks like hyper-focusing on the beginning. Now, why does the red pill do this? Because as we've discussed before, the whole red pill solution is flawed to begin with. So they diagnose the problem correctly, but then their solution is just get as many women into bed as you possibly can, right? And if you're optimizing for that, then it makes sense to hyper focus on the beginning, because that's all there is. There is no middle and there is no end, right? It's just the beginning. Like, how many women can I charm out of their underwear? And that's my measure of success, right? So I don't need to care about, let me put on the mask all the time, because that's all I care about is just getting through this very beginning phase. And once I'm through that, I'll be happy, right? That's what the red pill will tell you. Now, that's Bugman. As I've said, that's Bugman behavior. It's over-optimization. It's going from one thing to the next over and over, just like the new iPhone. Instead of the new iPhone, it's the next pretty girl that you found. You know, it's the same exact thing. You're not building up anything substantial, and so you're losing what's really important, which is the fundamental human connection. And the only way you get there is by being open on your part, and then also understanding what it is you're looking for, why you're doing it, and interviewing her. Like, are you right for me?
Right.
And she's going to want to move. If she likes you, you see how well this works. She's going to move into your frame naturally. She wants to be with you. She wants to prove herself to you, you know, and then that makes it so easy for you that you don't have to do anything. You just have your mask off. You're naturally yourself. If she doesn't vibe with you, goodbye. There are other women who will. This is another thing. When you over optimize, you end up chasing girls that aren't a good fit for you. Like, you end up trying to prove yourself to them because you want to get them into bed, and then you're losing part of yourself. Like, why are you doing that? Why is that so important to you that you need to sacrifice your true identity as a human being, as a man? That's totally wrong. It's going to lead you in so many topsy-turvy directions. So
right. And I think the main thing there, and what I like about what you said, is that if you over optimize at the beginning, you're actually not even thinking about the middle or the end, right? Because you're saying, hey, this is just, you're thinking about it in the wrong frame. And to think about it from the via negativa kind of style, okay, the problem is I can't get women, right? That's the problem. So instead of adding to the mix all these new kind of crazy one-liners and all these Tinder dating apps, etc., why don't I remove something to make it easier for me? So what I'm going to remove is, maybe I'll remove video games from my life, because that's a general positive thing to do. If you're out there and you think that that's not a positive thing, like, then you're probably under 18. I get that. But if you're above 18 and you're playing video games, just remove them from your life, because there's no reason to be playing them. But if you remove a video game from your life, then you start to kind of think, okay, now I've got more time on my hands. What am I going to do with that time? Well, maybe I'll do this and that and the other. And then suddenly you have a hobby that you can now be good. Maybe you could pick up woodworking or something, for example. And then you start picking up woodworking, and maybe you go to a woodworking meetup, right? You're not going to be able to do something like a woodworking meetup if you're addicted to video games. So where I'm going with this is remove vices, remove addictions, and pick up things that make you useful in life, and things that you're interested in that are actually going outside and doing stuff in the real world or building something. And you might find that it's going to be a lot easier for you to kind of meet women or meet people in general, which will lead to meeting women. and meet the women that you want to craft a system with long term. So that's kind of where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
Don't just immediately add something to your life. Try to remove something first, and that's going to be a way to kind of solve your problem.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Well, hey, do you want to do this this Reddit question we had that we saved for this week?
Definitely.
All right. Unless
you
you have
it pulled up?
anything you want to add on that, or you feel good about that one?
I think we did a good I think we did a good service of basically the basic content of it.
So I'll read this question and I'll let you address it first. Obviously, I'll have my own thoughts here, but this I think is very relevant to the last conversation we were just having. So the title of this question here: why do women seem to struggle to honestly admit to preferences which might be considered shallow? Okay. Now he goes into he asks questions basically like women will admit to liking tall men, 6-inch portfolio,
etc.
But sorry, women won't admit to that, right? That's what I meant to say. So women won't admit to this, and he's trying to ask why this is, and he contrasts it with men who are much more willing to admit, yeah, I like a girl with like a big behind and big boobs and all this crap, like what is it? Why is it that women are more afraid to admit this kind of thing? And I'll let you talk about that first.
Yeah, and I think this question in particular is very, very much related to what we were talking about because, again, there's 80% of women, I would say, in that category of they're not admitting the truth, don't even know what they want, right? They think they have this idea or image of what they want in a man, so they write it down on a dating app because that's what they're prompted to write down. They install the app and they have to write down their preferences. So when they're actually pushed into a corner to write those down, they're not actually in line with what's reality, right? So if you meet somebody from the real world that's not on one of these dating apps, in that 20% or maybe less, they're not going to give you these crazy expectations or these weird like preferences that they think they need or that are important. They're going to tell you like, oh, I just want to meet, and it kind of, this is the ironic thing. They're just going to say, I want to meet a nice guy, etc. Which 90% of the time, that's not quite the full picture, right? But on some level, the ones that say that they're not upfront about the preferences, which is what the individual is asking about, it's because they're fearing the ramifications from a social perspective of admitting the truth, right? Of admitting, hey, I want somebody who's 6'2", 6-inch portfolio, etc. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting that, right? But society has kind of told you, and even to a point where it's backfired on them, society has told you to kind of say, hey, we can't really admit stuff like that because that's kind of going to offend individuals that are, maybe not in that category. And that's the problem with what I believe in, and that's the top-down problem with society, in my view, right now, is that people are catering to a 1% or to 1 or 2% of people's feelings to a point where you can't even feel like you can admit your preferences. And so, kicking it over to you with my favorite, my fashion of, why is society not able to admit that, right? Like, why do you think there's a fear mechanism for some of these women of just admitting straight up like why they want what they like? And it goes for some men too, but
yeah. So I think it boils down to this fundamental discord between the truth and the society that we've built, which are two different things, right? It's kind of, we talk about that a lot. Everything is wrong. Everything is like on its head and backwards. So the truth, of course, is that women want to be with a man that they find attractive. And the deeper truth in that is that women are often attracted to shallow traits, just like men are. Women are attracted to men who are tall. Women are attracted to men who are really rich, who are, in great shape, have a lot of muscles, lean. They're attracted to these shallow traits. I mean, it's just a fact of life. It's a fact of nature. But the lie is that, the lie that gets told, and this even was the case probably before this cultural shift happened, but the lie that gets told is that the only thing that matters is your character. That the only thing anybody's ever going to care about you and the way that you're going to find love is to just be a good person. Just be nice. Just be nice to everyone, and you're going to find love because people are going to see that you're a good person, and they're going to love that, and they're going to want to be with you just for that reason alone, right? That's the lie that's told. So there's a discord between this ideal that we all strive towards, which is admirable, sounds good, I know, would love if that was true, and then the actual truth that we all live in. I think women in particular are much more sensitive to this. Like you said, they're much more likely to feel the need to fit in, to feel the need to be accepted and to be seen as good people. And men fall for this too. As we were talking about in our final segment there in the long form conversation, we were saying that women see themselves as flawed, because they are, but they don't like that about themselves. But then there's another twist where they also want other people to see that about themselves anyway, right? They want to be seen for how they see themselves. And this is difficult for them because how they see themselves is shallow, because people are just naturally shallow, right? So they sort of choose the happy lie over the much more painful truth. As a man, what you need to understand, the key point about this, is that when women express their preferences, you can pretty much ignore them basically all the time.
Right.
And especially if it's something about very shallow. What you would love to find and what you should seek is a woman who expresses a preference that sounds like, I want a man of God. I want a man who's stable. I want a man who will be a good father, who's responsible, who, is going to keep me safe. If you hear a woman say those kinds of things, great, green flag. Now, she's still going to have shallow preferences deep down, but she is much more likely to be able to look past those, right? Because it is unavoidable. You're just a human being, so naturally you're going to have certain attractions and certain shallow preferences. But she is much more likely to suppress those and sort of overlook them. And even if you meet those things, it's still better for you, because that means that her priorities are straight. Her head is on right. She's looking towards the things that really matter. So that's what I would take this as a man, is listen to her preferences. But if they start off with 6 feet, 6-inch portfolio, big house, then I don't think that's somebody you want to spend any time with, right? Because her perspective is askew.
No. Right. And I think based on what you were saying, as far as if she does come out the gate and say, hey, I'm looking for somebody who gives me safety and security, man of God, etc., she's more likely to be truthful about other things in her life to herself and also to you. So I think that's that's why that's a green flag, is because she's able to at least come up with something she's able to be honest about things that are really important, right? Which are the safety and security aspect of it. So a lot of those things are proxies for safety and security, like, being rich, for example, like that's a proxy for providing safety and security, right? Like being physically fit is a proxy for having safety and security. Like that's what safety and security looks like, right? If you're physically fit, it means you can she in her mind is thinking, he can take care of me if something went down, right? So definitely build up your fitness and build up your career for those aspects. But when you hear if you ever hear somebody say that, my preferences are safety, security, man of God, etc., then that's like Dean was saying, that's a green flag, because that's somebody that's being honest about something that you can kind of translate that to other parts of her life. She'll probably be honest about those things too. But
yes.
I think that's kind of, there's a lot of different reasons why. The question is really twofold. One is, are those preferences real? And then two is, why do they lie about the preferences? So the preferences are real. Like there are some shallow preferences there, but at the end of the day, is like he said, they don't matter, right? Right. You can't take those preferences and say, well, because she said that she won't date somebody with, this immutable characteristic that I have, you can't let that stop you from attempting, right? So until you get hard rejected by somebody, like just attempt it, right? That's my opinion. And then move on if they give you the hard rejection, but that's fine. But don't not walk up to them because they have a sign that says, I don't date, people from Canada or whatever, right? And if you're from Canada. So it's like, operate under the mindset of, I'm still vetting them, right? Am I willing to date her, right? It's a kind of question, right? So it's like, and also remember, it's more about an organic kind of, is she in the picture, and is she going to make my life better, or is she going to make my life worse? You know what I'm saying? So that's what you have to really think about. Yeah.
So I think like my fundamental issue, if I haven't like an issue with the question, which sounds wrong, because the question is fine. I mean, I don't really have an issue with it, but I do think the perspective is a little wrong, because as I was saying, you don't necessarily want a woman who's hyper-focused on those shallow traits. Like, it's okay, it may sound refreshing that she admits it. Like, okay, cool. Like, I'm glad you're able to at least admit that you have shallow preferences. But keep in mind, what I was saying is, like, if that's what she's really focused on, her mind is in the wrong place. Like, as I've said before, I think I said in the last episode, women will develop physical attraction based on other traits that are not immutable. If you're capable of providing safety and security, if you are stable, then she will become attracted to you over time, as long as you're doing what you need to be doing. So Tony said exactly right. Like, it's not necessarily a stop sign, but I would be hesitant to even continue, talking to someone like that, because in my mind, I think she doesn't understand herself well enough to know that those things don't actually matter. I'd rather skip ahead and find a woman who already knows that those things don't matter, even though deep down she has the preferences. She's willing to say, yeah, you know, it would be nice, but ultimately that's not what's most important. I'd rather skip ahead to that. But I do
Right.
agree with Tony. It's not necessarily a stop sign. And if you really like a girl, then
Right.
try it anyway. Just do it.
And I think, well, let me say one more thing about that. I think a lot of these traits and a lot of these red flags for them that they put on, that they say, oh, I won't date somebody if they're from Canada. I'm using that as a hypothetical, right? A lot of these are because their ex-boyfriend was from Canada or whatever, something mundane, or maybe their least favorite character in the Marvel movie was from Canada, whatever, right? So a lot of that doesn't really relate to you. And what I'm getting at is, are you, because they don't like Thanos and he's from Canada and you're from Canada, does that mean you're Thanos? Obviously, in her mind, yes, right? But in reality's mind, no, it's not. That's not the case.
Right.
So,
Right.
Some of these are just whatever. Don't let it stop you, but do analyze if it's a list of ridiculous traits. Maybe that calls into question like her character, so maybe don't even pursue. But don't let it stop you. That's the whole point, right? And I think to kick it over to an anecdotal perspective for my own life, I'm not thinking about like when I was when I met my wife, I wasn't thinking about, oh, it has to be like a specific. There's a list of traits I need in a woman. It has to be this is the case, and then therefore I'm going to look for that person, and here she is, and then now I've narrowed it down to one woman. Is this, and then make it work with her? Is that going to work? You can't think of it like that. You have to think of it kind of what we were saying in the beginning of the episode is non-Bugman style. You have to think of it in a way where, how do I generalize this to a point where it's actually optimized to a point but not over-optimized, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, what solution can I provide to myself, and almost to the via negativa style, like what can I remove from my life to simply like move forward and have the best outcome, right? And a lot of that comes down to finding what works for you as a hobby, as maybe religion is something you need as well. And some of that stuff is just stuff you're not ever going to think about those solutions if you're always thinking, how do I, as the red pill says, how do I just get laid, right? And that's why I think all of that conversation is a distraction, and it's going to make you less likely to succeed in a romantic world. So.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, so that's the only question I had for today. I just thought it was so relevant that, why don't we work it into this end of this conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. Is there anything you want to sum up or wrap up about the subject of overoptimization, bugmanery?
Yeah, and I think to sum up, I would basically say something akin to, don't be a bug man, don't over-optimize everything. Try starting from the ground up on some things, and then also the main takeaway in my mind is not everything is jump to the first answer on Google, right? And we didn't even talk about that, but you know what I'm saying with this, right? Not everything is what is the best software, and then the Google result is Adobe because that's what they put in, right? They programmed it to kind of say they've indexed it to tell you that, right? Because it's sponsored.
Yeah.
So think about ways to solve your own life with removing things. That's kind of where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
What about you?
So I would add basically the idea behind escaping bugmanery is reconnecting with the deeper part of yourself that they are trying to cut you off from, right? It will make you a more full person, a more interesting person, a happier person, and it will give you the armor that you need to defend yourself against it, because it's coming at you from all angles, and every aspect of your life is being over optimized. You're being sold things constantly, and what we're trying to tell you is how to escape that, how to get out of it, make yourself more self-sufficient, and like I said, just more armored against these types of things that are designed to disconnect you from more fundamental truths. That's what I would sum up with that. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. But all that to be said is thanks so much for checking out the video, and be sure to like the video, comment on it, and subscribe to the channel for more content. And we're going to come at you next week with another full recording.
Sounds good. All right.